the day Imani Graves buried her father, Harold Bennett, she thought grief had already taken everything, until Derrick Vaughn's betrayal ripped her world apart and led her toward a love she never saw coming. The church was silent, except for the low hum of the organ. The scent of lilies clung to the air, heavy and suffocating, as though even the flowers mourned. Imani Graves sat in the front pew, her black dress crisp but her spirit undone. Her hands trembled in her lap, fingers twisting a silk handkerchief that had belonged to her father, Harold Bennett. It still carried a faint trace of his cologne, warm cedar and musk. Every time the scent reached her, it broke her all over again. Before we get deeper into Imani's story, tell me, where are you watching from right now? Comment your city below. And if this moment touches your heart the way the handkerchief still clings to hers, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and like this video. Now, let's rewind to the moments that brought Imani here. Her father's casket sat just a few feet away, polished mahogany gleaming under the dim light. It didn't feel real. Harold Bennett had been larger than life. A man who walked into a room and silenced it without saying a word. A man whose laugh could fill a house. To the world, he was a successful businessman with charm and power. To Imani, he was simply daddy. And now he was gone. Her eyes blurred with tears as she stared at the casket. She could almost hear his voice reminding her, "Baby girl, strength isn't about holding back tears. It's about knowing when to let them fall." Beside her, Derrick Vaughn slid his arm around her shoulders, his grip firm but not quite comforting. "Hold your head up, Imani," he whispered, his voice smooth and commanding. "Your father wouldn't want to see you like this." Imani nodded, though his words pressed on her chest like a weight. She wanted tenderness, someone to share her pain, not a lecture about appearances. Still, she leaned into him, because right now he was all she had. Or so she thought. If you've ever leaned on someone in your darkest moment, only to wonder if they truly understood your pain, what did that reveal about them? Comment below. I'd love to hear your story. Derrick sat tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. He scanned the room, his sharp eyes moving from face to face, lingering on the polished shoes, the expensive watches, the women in designer dresses. To anyone watching, he was a devoted husband, standing by his grieving wife. But inside, Derrick's mind was elsewhere. All this power, all this influence, he thought, stealing a glance at the casket. And now it's gone, or maybe not gone. Maybe waiting for someone bold enough to claim it. He squeezed Imani's shoulder a little tighter, as if to remind her and himself that she was his. The service began. The pastor's voice rolled through the church, speaking of Harold's accomplishments, his kindness, his devotion to community. Each word made Imani ache. She felt like a child again, suddenly small, suddenly unanchored. When the choir sang, her breath caught, and she buried her face in Derrick's chest. But Derrick barely moved, his jaw tightening, his gaze fixed on Harold's business partners seated across the aisle. Men in expensive suits exchanged whispers, passing discreet glances toward Imani. Derrick noticed every look. A spark of irritation flickered in his chest. They're already circling, like vultures. They know she's vulnerable. He tilted his head, whispering, "Don't let them see you fall apart. You're stronger than this." Imani pulled back, eyes swollen, staring at him. "Derrick, I'm not strong today. I lost my father. Can't I just—" "Shoo!" he interrupted quickly, offering a smile to the people behind them. His hand never left her shoulder, but for the first time, Imani felt the chill of it. After the service, mourners gathered outside. The September sun was bright, too bright for such a day. Imani stood quietly, accepting condolences with soft nods and whispered thanks. Everyone told her how wonderful Harold had been. Everyone told her she was his mirror image, his pride. But the words blurred together. All she wanted was her father's hand in hers one last time. Derrick, meanwhile, shook hands with Harold's colleagues, his charm turned up to full volume. He laughed at small jokes, complimented watches, exchanged numbers. He was magnetic, the perfect picture of composure. To outsiders, he looked like a protective husband keeping his wife afloat. But one of Harold's old friends, Mr. Alvarez, placed a gentle hand on Imani's arm. His eyes lingered with something unspoken. "Your father left things in order, child. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Imani frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Before Alvarez could answer, Derrick stepped in smoothly, his smile quick and practiced. "Thank you, sir. I'll make sure Imani is taken care of." Alvarez's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he simply nodded before stepping away. Imani glanced at Derrick. "Why did you—" "Imani, you're exhausted. Don't overthink old men's riddles. Derrick cut her off. He kissed her forehead. I've got you. His words sounded sweet, but his eyes betrayed something else, a flicker of calculation, of possession. That night, back at the mansion Harold had built, Imani sat alone in her childhood bedroom. The moonlight fell across the polished wooden desk her father had once used. She touched the surface gently, remembering how he would sit there, working late into the night, always pausing to ask if she needed anything. Tears streamed down her face. She whispered into the silence, "Daddy, what am I supposed to do without you?" From down the hall, Derrick's voice carried, smooth and confident, as he spoke on the phone. Imani couldn't hear every word, but one sentence froze her in place. She doesn't have a clue. Not yet. Her breath caught, her stomach twisting. Who was he talking about? What didn't she know? Imani wiped her tears quickly. For the first time since the funeral, grief was joined by something else. Unease. The city of Atlanta shimmered under late September heat. Outside the Bennett estate, magnolias stretched their arms wide, their blossoms long gone, their branches whispering in the wind. The house itself was a monument, red brick, white columns, iron gates. It had stood for nearly a century, passed down, expanded, modernized, but always Bennett. Inside, the air was thick with condolences and whispered conversations. Mourners had followed from the funeral to the family home, where platters of food lined tables and glasses of sweet tea clinked with ice. Imani Graves moved slowly among them, her black dress brushing the floor, her curls pulled into a simple bun. She smiled faintly at old church mothers who clasped her hands, at her father's colleagues who bowed their heads in solemn respect. Each face blurred into the next, each, "I'm so sorry for your loss," like another stone on her chest. Everywhere she turned, the weight of Harold Bennett's absence pressed against her ribs. Derrick Vaughn stood at her side, every bit the Southern gentleman. His charcoal suit fit, like a second skin, his tie loosened just enough to suggest both polish and ease. He guided Imani with a hand on her back, introduced her to Harold's associates, and laughed in that effortless way that made people lean closer. But as Imani thanked people quietly, Derrick's eyes flickered, taking note of watches, cufflinks, whispered exchanges. The way men in navy suits leaned toward Imani, their hands heavy on her arm. The way they said her name with too much weight. Derrick masked the irritation in his chest with a smile. He leaned close to Imani, his breath brushing her ear. "You see how they're looking at you? Like they know something you don't." Imani blinked, unsettled. "They're just grieving like us." "Grieving?" Derrick's lips curved into a smile, but his words dripped with something sharper. "Baby, no one comes to these things just to cry. They come to see what's left, and who's left in charge." Imani's stomach nodded. She wanted to dismiss him, but a memory of Mr. Alvarez's cryptic words stirred again. Your father left things in order. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. The evening stretched on. At some point, Imani slipped away upstairs to her father's study. She needed a breath. The room smelled of him. Cedarwood, leather, and faint cigar smoke that lingered in the bookshelves. The walls were lined with portraits of family. Harold shaking hands with mayors, Harold at ribbon cuttings, Harold holding a much younger Imani in his lap. She sat in his leather chair, her hands gripping the armrests as though they might tether her to him. "Daddy," she whispered, voice breaking. Behind her, the door creaked. Derrick leaned against the frame, his tie loosened, his eyes fixed on her. "You keep running away from me tonight." Imani wiped her tears. "I just needed a moment. Alone." "Alone," Derrick repeated slowly, stepping inside. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on a locked cabinet near the desk. Funny how this place feels more alive with him gone than it did when he was here. Imani frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Derrick moved closer, his voice low, silk over steel. "Your father, God rest his soul, was a man of mysteries, secrets, the kind that can change lives." Imani shook her head. "Not tonight, Derrick. Please." But he crouched in front of her, his hands sliding onto her knees. His eyes burned with intensity. "Baby, open your eyes. Do you really think Harold Bennett left this earth without leaving you something? Without leaving us something?" The word us lodged in her chest like a splinter. Later, when the house had quieted, Imani overheard voices in the downstairs parlor. She crept halfway down the staircase, careful not to let the old wood creak. Derrick's voice was low, urgent, speaking to two men she didn't recognize. It's only a matter of time before she finds out. The empire, assets, properties, accounts, are in her name. But she's too naive, too broken to manage any of it. That's where I come in. Imani's breath caught. Her hand clutched the railing until her knuckles whitened. One of the men chuckled. And what happens if she pushes back? Derrick's reply was cold, cutting through the dim air. She won't. She needs me. Always has. Imani's knees nearly buckled. She pressed her hand to her mouth, holding in a sob. She stumbled back to her room, her chest heaving. Her husband, the man she clung to for comfort, the man who kissed her forehead at the funeral, was plotting against her, plotting to control what her father had left behind. But the worst part wasn't the greed in his voice. It was the certainty. She needs me. Always has. The words rang in her ears, crueler than any knife. If someone you trusted with your whole heart revealed their loyalty was only skin deep, would you confront them immediately, or wait, gather proof, and strike when they least expect it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Hours later, unable to sleep, Imani padded down to the study once more. Moonlight spilled across the desk. She pulled open drawers, searching for, she didn't even know what, something of her father's, something to steady her. Her hand shook as she opened the locked cabinet with a small key she found in the desk. Inside were stacks of files, deeds, bank statements. Numbers leapt from the pages, millions upon millions. And every account, every holding bore her name. Imani's throat went dry. She backed away, the papers slipping from her hands and scattering across the rug. Her father hadn't just left her memories. He left her an empire. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Derrick's words from earlier, she doesn't have a clue, slammed into her chest with brutal clarity. She wasn't just mourning anymore. She was in danger. And for the first time, through the ache of grief and the sting of betrayal, another fire sparked in her belly, rage. Atlanta nights carried a rhythm of their own. Cicadas hummed in the trees beyond the Bennett estate, their endless chorus buzzing to the thick September air. Yet inside the mansion, silence reigned. Imani Graves sat cross-legged on her childhood bed, the files scattered around her like broken glass. Deeds, bank accounts, offshore investments, numbers that didn't make sense and yet spelled out one undeniable truth. Harold Bennett had left her an empire. Her pulse drummed in her ears as Derrick's words replayed, cruel and steady. She doesn't have a clue. She needs me. Always has. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing inward. She told herself it wasn't real. Maybe she misheard. Maybe Derrick was just protecting her, smoothing things over with businessmen who wanted to exploit her grief. He had always been her shield, hadn't he? Her fingers tightened around the deed, crumpling the paper. Hadn't he? The door creaked open. Derrick leaned in, his silhouette backlit by the soft hall light. He wore no tie now, his shirt collar undone, his expression polished into gentle concern. "Imani," he said softly, "what are you doing awake?" "It's past 2. She shoved the papers back into the cabinet, her movements quick, guilty. "I couldn't sleep." Derrick stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the room before settling on her face. He tilted his head, the way he always did when he wanted her to feel seen. "You've been crying again." Imani swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "Of course I've been crying, Derrick. My father just died." He nodded, his lips pressing into a sympathetic line as he sank onto the bed beside her. His hand reached for hers, warm and commanding. "I know, and that's why you shouldn't torture yourself with these old files. Harold was complicated. He left a mess, and you don't need to drown in it. Let me handle things." There was again that "let me handle things." She stiffened under his touch. She wanted to confront him, to shout that she'd heard his midnight deal-making, to throw the word betrayal in his face. But the word stuck in her throat. What if she was wrong? What if her grief was twisting things, making her paranoid? And deeper still, the fear she hated admitting even to herself. What if he left? The thought sliced her open. For all his arrogance, Derrick had been her anchor, her partner, the one she clung to when the world crumbled. If she accused him and she was wrong, she'd lose not just her husband but the last semblance of stability she had. Imani stared at the fire, her heart racing. She thought of all the masks people wear, how the ones closest to you can be strangers in disguise. And isn't that the truth of life? That sometimes the people who smile the brightest hold the darkest secrets? If you've ever felt that sting of realizing someone isn't who you thought they were, you know how much it changes you. And here's the thing. This story only gets darker and more revealing. If you're feeling that tension in your chest right now, if you want to see how Imani fights through betrayal and finds her strength, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, so you don't miss what comes next. And if for some reason you won't, That's okay too. Drop down into the comments and tell me why. I'd love to know what keeps you watching in silence. The storm raged on. Derrick leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. We'll get through this, Imani. Together. Your father may have built this empire, but I'll be the one to protect it. Imani pulled back, her eyes locking on his. Protect it or control it? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Her pulse spiked. Derrick's smile faltered, just for a second. Then it returned, smooth and calculated. You really think I'd ever hurt you? After everything we've been through? Her silence was louder than words. Lightning flashed, illuminating the tension between them. In that brief electric glow, Imani saw it, the hunger in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. A man who wasn't just grieving, a man who wanted something more. And for the first time, she let herself admit the truth. She was trapped in the storm not just by weather, but by the man sitting inches from her. The storm had passed by morning. The sky over Atlanta stretched pale and cloudless, as if mocking the chaos that had raged the night before. But inside the Bennett estate, silence lingered like smoke after fire. Imani Graves wandered into her father's study, the place she had once been too young to enter, a place that still smelled of leather-bound books and cigar smoke. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, dust motes swirling in its glow. Her eyes fell on the locked cabinet again. She had barely scratched the surface of its contents. Files stacked like bricks, each stamped with Harold Bennett's name. She pulled the key from her pocket, her fingers trembling, and opened it. This time, she took her time. Property deeds, offshore accounts, quiet donations to charities she had never known about. And at the bottom, a faded folder marked in her father's handwriting. For Imani. Her breath caught. She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. My dearest Imani, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. I never wanted you to carry the weight of my empire while I lived. I wanted you to have a childhood, a life untouched by greed and ambition. But you are my daughter, and you deserve to know the truth. Everything I built belongs to you. Be careful. Wealth attracts wolves. Not all who smile at you wish you well. Trust yourself, baby girl. Trust the lessons I taught you. And remember, love is the only empire worth fighting for. Always, Daddy. The words blurred as tears filled Imani's eyes. Her father had hidden this not to keep her out, but to protect her. All the times he'd called her his little girl weren't condescension. They were armor. She clutched the letter to her chest, but beneath the ache of loss another truth simmered. Her father had known the wolves would come, and one of them was already inside her home. That evening, Derrick found her in the study, the folder still open before her. His eyes landed on the papers, and for the first time his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. What's all this? He asked, his tone too casual. Imani folded the letter quickly. Just things my father left behind. Derrick stepped closer, his presence filling the room. You shouldn't be digging through this without me. Harold trusted me with the details of his business. Imani's chest tightened. Funny, I don't see your name on any of these accounts, or these deeds, or this letter. Her voice wavered, but the words landed sharp. Derrick's jaw flexed. He crouched beside her chair, placing a hand on her knee. His touch was warm, his tone tender. Baby, listen to me. Your father may have left everything in your name, but you don't know how to run an empire. I do. Let me take care of it. Let me take care of you. She looked into his eyes and for a moment, just a moment, saw something raw beneath the polished mask. Not love, not tenderness, but hunger. Imani's mind slipped back to when she first met him, at a charity gala Harold had hosted downtown. She had been 24, fresh out of grad school, nervous in her dress that felt too tight. Derrick had walked up with a glass of champagne, and a smile that melted every insecurity. You look like you'd rather be anywhere but here, he'd said, his voice smooth as honey. She'd laughed, relieved, and they'd talked for hours. He'd listened, really listened, as she spoke about her dreams of working in education, of building programs for underprivileged kids in Atlanta. Back then, he had seemed like the one man who saw her, not Harold's fortune. But now, as she sat in the study with his hand heavy on her knee, she wondered if he had seen her, or simply her proximity to Harold's power. Later that night, unable to bear the weight of silence, Imani wandered down to the kitchen. To her surprise, she found Alvarez there, sipping black coffee at the counter. Couldn't sleep? He asked, his voice low, his accent wrapping around each word. She shook her head, her arms folding protectively across her chest. Alvarez studied her, his eyes kind but sharp. Your father trusted me. He told me you need guidance, but also that you had to find your own strength. Imani swallowed. Why does everyone keep talking to me like I'm in danger? He set his cup down, leaning closer. Because you are. Harold's wealth, your wealth, has been hidden for years. Not to deceive you, but to shield you. And now that he's gone, people will come for it. Some with contracts, some with smiles, and some, his gaze flickered, heavy with unspoken meaning, from within your own home. Imani's breath caught. She looked away, but Alvarez gently lifted her chin. You already know who I mean. Her chest ached. I can't. You can, he interrupted firmly. But you must be smart. Don't confront too soon. Gather your proof. Protect yourself first. Back upstairs, Derrick was waiting. He sat at the edge of the bed, his sleeves rolled up, his tie discarded. His eyes tracked her as she entered, unreadable. Where were you? His voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. I needed water. Funny, he murmured. I didn't hear the faucet. Her pulse spiked. He was watching her too closely, his charm fraying into suspicion. She climbed into bed, turning her back to him. His hand slid across her hip, pulling her close. To anyone else, it would look like an embrace. But Imani felt the weight of it, a claim, not comfort. In the dark, with Derrick's breath warm against her neck, she realized something chilling. She wasn't just living with betrayer. She was sleeping beside one. The next morning, she opened the bottom drawer of her father's desk and found a photograph tucked under files. Harold Bennett younger, standing beside a man she didn't recognize. On the back, scrawled in Harold's hand, Julian Pierce, the only one I trust. Her heart thudded. She didn't know him, but suddenly, she knew she had to. The web was tightening. The wolves were circling. And for the first time, Imani realized she wasn't alone. Somewhere in Atlanta was a man her father trusted. A man who might hold the key to everything. The city air was crisp that morning, sunlight bouncing off Atlanta's glass towers. For the first time in weeks, Imani Graves felt something stir inside her chest, an impulse not to run, not to hide, but to seek. She clutched the photograph tighter in her coat pocket, the one bearing her father's handwriting. Julian Pierce, the only one I trust. Julian Pierce's office was tucked into a corner of Midtown, above a quiet law practice that bore his name in gold letters. When Imani entered, she expected another man in a suit, another polished smile. But Julian was different. He rose from behind his desk, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that carried both weariness and warmth. His suit was well-fitted but not flashy, his movements unhurried. Imani Graves, he said softly, his voice like low velvet. You look just like your father when he was younger. The words cut deep, unexpected. Imani swallowed the lump in her throat. You knew him well? Julian gestured to a chair. 30 years. Your father was my mentor, my friend, and the man who saved me when I had nothing. Imani sat, her fingers twisting in her lap. He left me everything, but I don't know what to do with it, or who to trust. Julian's gaze lingered on her, steady but gentle. He always said you had his fire, that when the time came, you'd find your way. You don't need to know everything today. You just need someone to stand with you while you figure it out. Those words landed like a bomb. For the first time since the funeral, she felt seen, not as Harold's heiress, not as Derrick's wife, but as Imani. Later that afternoon, they walked along Piedmont Park, the lake glittering beneath the autumn sun. Families laughed in the distance, dogs tugged leashes, joggers passed by. But the world felt narrow to the two of them. Imani's voice trembled. Derrick, I don't think I can trust him. I overheard him at the funeral, Julian. He was talking about money, about me, like I was a transaction. Julian stopped walking. His jaw tightened, but his tone stayed calm. I'm sorry you had to hear that, but I'm not surprised. She blinked at him. You knew? I knew Derrick Vaughn was ambitious, charming, dangerous in his own way. Harold warned me he had doubts about him. But you seemed happy. Harold didn't want to ruin that for you. The ground tilted beneath her feet. So you're saying my father knew? Julian's eyes softened. He trusted you'd see the truth when you were ready. He believed in your strength more than you believe in it yourself. Imani's chest cracked open at those words. She wrapped her arms around herself, but it didn't stop the tears. Julian reached out, hesitant, respectful, and brushed them away with the back of his knuckle. The touch was feather-light, but it unraveled her. For the first time, someone wasn't demanding, wasn't manipulating, wasn't masking desire and control. It was just care. She looked up at him, and for a moment, The world narrowed his eyes. Safe, steady, unrushed. That night, back at the Bennett estate, Imani sat in the kitchen with Alvarez. The house was silent, Derrick conveniently away, handling business. She told Alvarez about Julian, about the walk, about the way she felt lighter in his presence. Alvarez smiled faintly. Harold was right to trust him. And if your father trusted him, you can too. Just remember, Senorita, trust does not mean surrender. You still lead. Imani nodded, but deep down, something more than trust was blooming. It was subtle, dangerous, thrilling, the faint spark of attraction. She climbed into bed alone that night, Derrick absent, and closed her eyes. Instead of dread, she carried with her the memory of Julian's hand brushing away her tears, the steady weight of his words. For the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. 2 days later, Julian came to the estate to review documents with her. Papers sprawled across the dining table, numbers and contracts that made Imani's head ache. At one point, she sighed, tossing down a pen. I was never meant for this world. My father built it, but it doesn't feel like mine. Julian leaned closer, lowering his voice. You don't need to be Harold Bennett. You just need to be Imani Graves. That's enough. Her heart swelled, dangerous and sweet. She searched his face for judgment, but found none, only steady warmth. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same page. Neither pulled away immediately. It was nothing, and it was everything. For a fleeting moment, Imani allowed herself to imagine a world without Derrick's shadows, without whispered betrayals. A world where love wasn't a chain, but a shelter. The air inside the Bennett estate felt wrong. Still heavy waiting. Imani Graves had grown accustomed to the tension that swirled whenever Derrick Vaughn was near, but tonight it felt thicker, like a storm pressing against her chest, even though the skies outside Atlanta were clear. Julian Pierce sat across from her in the study. His sleeves rolled to his forearms as they pored over contracts. For 2 weeks now, he had been her steady presence, her quiet anchor in the chaos. Their bond had deepened in small ways. His listening silence, the way he stood just close enough to shield but never smother, the rare smiles that flickered when she teased him about his neat handwriting. But tonight, something hovered between them. Imani leaned back, rubbing her temples. Every line I read makes me feel smaller, like my father's world is swallowing me whole. Julian's gaze softened. It's not swallowing you, Imani. It's testing you, and you're stronger than you think. Her throat tightened. No one spoke to her like that, without pity, without pressure, without agenda. She felt the heat of his words more than the whiskey in her glass. Silence stretched. Too long. Their eyes held, and for one fragile, dangerous heartbeat, she wondered what it would feel like if Julian leaned forward, closed the space, pressed his lips to hers. But the moment shattered before it could bloom. The door swung open. Derrick stood there, his expression unreadable at first, but his eyes, sharp as razors, moved from Imani to Julian, to the spread of papers between them. What the hell is this? His voice was calm, but the calm was worse than shouting. It carried the threat of a blade drawn slow. Imani's pulse roared. We're going through my father's accounts. Julian's helping me understand. Derrick's jaw flexed. Helping you or replacing me? Julian rose, measured and unflinching. Harold trusted me to guide her. That's all this is. Derrick's laugh was low, dangerous. Funny, I don't recall Harold naming you in his will. Imani stood quickly, stepping between them. Enough. Derrick, please. This is what it looks like. But Derrick's eyes locked on hers, and for the first time, the mask he wore cracked open fully. Rage, betrayal, hunger, all of it spilling through. You sit in here, drinking with another man, while your husband's out fighting to keep the vultures from tearing apart your father's empire. Tell me, Imani, how long have you been sneaking around behind my back? The accusation cut deeper than she expected. Not because it was true, but because some part of her, some shameful, secret part, wanted what Derrick was accusing her of. Wanted Julian. Her silence lasted 1 second too long. Derrick saw it, his face twisted. Unbelievable. Julian's voice was steady. You're twisting this. She deserves clarity, not control. Derrick turned on him, his fists clenching. And who the hell are you to decide what my wife deserves? Imani grabbed Derrick's arm before he could lunge. Stop it. Both of you. But Derrick wrenched free, his eyes burning into her. You want to know what your father left you, Imani? Let me tell you the truth, he never did. Derrick stalked to the cabinet, pulling out a file she hadn't seen before. He tossed it on the desk, paper scattering like ashes. Your father wasn't a saint. He wasn't protecting you. He was hiding his sins. Offshore accounts? Bribes? Business deals with men who'd slit your throat for a missed payment. You think this empire is clean? Derrick's voice rose, venom in every word. No, baby. It's blood money. And now it's yours. Imani's stomach dropped. She grabbed the papers, scanning the damning lines. Transactions coded, shadow companies, contracts signed in her father's name. No, her whisper cracked. No, he wouldn't. He did, Derrick snapped. And he left you holding the bag. But don't worry. He leaned close, his breath hot against her cheek. I'll clean it up. I'll protect you, even from the truth. Imani's hands trembled as she shoved the papers away. You're lying. You're twisting it. Am I? Derrick snarled. Or did you just finally see what Daddy kept from his little princess? Her knees nearly buckled. Julian reached for her, but Derrick's glare pinned him back. You think she needs you? Derrick hissed. She doesn't. She needs me. She's nothing without me. The words hit harder than any slap. For the first time, Imani felt not just betrayed, but belittled. That night, Derrick didn't sleep beside her. He stormed out, leaving the estate in silence. Julian stayed, pacing the hallway like a guard dog. Imani curled on her father's old couch. The letter Harold had written her clutched to her chest. But instead of comfort, it burned. Every line of trust yourself felt like a taunt. Her mind raced. Could Derrick be right? Was her father's empire built on corruption? Was she destined to inherit not a legacy, but a curse? And worst of all, had she already betrayed herself by letting her heart lean toward Julian, even for a moment? The shame pressed harder than grief. She closed her eyes, but there was no sleep, only the echo of Derrick's voice. She's nothing without me. Imani forced herself into the city, determined to breathe air not tainted by the mansion's walls. She walked through Centennial Park, the noise of children's laughter and fountains spilling around her. But even there, Derrick's shadow followed. Her phone buzzed with his message. Dinner tonight. Don't be late. It wasn't a request. She shoved the phone back into her purse, but her body trembled. For the first time, the thought crept in unbidden. What if I never get free? Julian's voice echoed in her mind. You just need someone to stand with you while you figure out. But how could she lean on him now? Derrick had planted poison in her veins, twisting what was fragile between her and Julian into something dirty, shameful. That evening, she sat across from Derrick at a candlelit restaurant in Buckhead. To the world, they were perfect. Handsome husband, elegant wife, the picture of wealth. But beneath the table, her hands clenched into fists. Derrick smiled at the waiter, poured her wine, reached across the table to touch her wrist. The same hand that had once felt protective now felt like a shackle. He leaned in, his voice smooth for crowd but sharp in her ear. Whatever you think you feel for Julian Pierce, it ends tonight. Do you understand? Her heart thudded. Her mouth was dry. And for the first time in her life, Imani Graves had no answer. The night after dinner with Derrick felt endless. Imani Graves sat in her car outside the Bennett estate, fingers gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles burned white. Inside, she could see the warm glow of light spilling from the windows, the life she was supposed to step back into. But every part of her resisted. Her father's letter burned in her purse. Julian's voice haunted her memory. Derrick's words, "She's nothing without me," echoed louder than both. For the first time, she didn't move. She didn't rush to obey, to smooth things over, to slip back into the wife Derrick wanted her to be. She sat frozen, trembling, suspended between the past and a future she could barely imagine. Julian found her the next morning in Piedmont Park again, seated on a bench by the fountain. Her hair was undone, her eyes hollow from lack of sleep. "You didn't go home," he said quietly. Imani shook her head. "I couldn't." He sat beside her, not too close, not demanding. Just there, her voice cracked. "He said my father's empire was dirty, that I inherited a curse. And maybe he's right. Maybe Derrick's the only one strong enough to handle it. Maybe I really am nothing without him." Julian turned toward her, his gaze steady, unflinching. "Don't let him write your story. Imani, your father didn't build an empire to see you chained. He trusted you because he knew you could carry it. Not because you needed someone else to." Her throat tightened. "But what if I can't?" Julian's words were simple, but they sank deep. "Then you'll learn, and I'll stand with you while you do." Imani stared at the fountain spray, at the sunlight catching the water like diamonds. A thought flickered in her mind. What if choosing herself was possible? And isn't that the question we all face at some point? To keep living the life someone else writes for us, or to risk everything for the one that's truly ours? That's what Imani is wrestling with right now. And if you want to walk through that fire with her, to see whether she steps into freedom or falls back into chains, hit that like button and subscribe now. Don't miss this moment of reckoning. And if you're the kind of person who wouldn't, go to the comments. Tell me why you'd stay silent. Because sometimes silence says the most. Imani's phone buzzed on the bench. Derrick again, where are you? She stared at the screen. For years, she had answered. For years, she had folded herself smaller to fit the cage he built around her. Her thumb hovered. Her pulse raced. Then, slowly, trembling, she pressed delete. No reply. Julian saw it. He didn't cheer, didn't gloat. He simply nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement of a battle fought in silence. Imani exhaled, a shaky, broken sound that turned into a sob. Julian reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. For the first time, she chose not fear. She chose herself. That evening, back at the estate, Derrick stormed into study. Where the hell were you? Imani stood tall, Harold's letter in one hand, Julian's business card in the other. I was deciding, she said softly. His laugh was sharp, cruel. Deciding what? Whether I belonged to you or to me. The words shook, but they carried fire. Derrick froze, his smirk faltering. I'm done being your shadow, she continued. I'm done letting you decide who I am. She placed Julian's card on the desk, her father's letter beside it. I know the truth now, and I'll carry it. Without you. Derrick's face twisted, rage and disbelief colliding. You think you can run this world without me? You'll crumble. Imani's heart thundered, but her voice was steady. Then I'll crumble on my own terms. He lunged toward her, but she didn't flinch. Alvarez appeared in the doorway, his frame solid, unyielding. Step back, Vaughn, he growled. Derrick's eyes burned, but he stopped. For the first time, Imani saw fear flicker in him. Not of Alvarez, but of her. Because she had finally made the choice. The Bennett estate no longer felt like a prison. 2 weeks had passed since the night Imani Graves told Derrick Vaughn she was done being his shadow. In that time, the air had shifted, the walls had loosened, and for the first time since Harold Bennett's funeral, she could breathe. Derrick hadn't vanished quietly. He fought. Papers filed, threats whispered, lawyers circling like vultures. But his desperation exposed him. Fraudulent accounts he tried to seize were traced back to him. Partnerships he bragged about collapsed under scrutiny. Piece by piece, the empire he thought he could steal crumbled. Not on Imani's shoulders, but on his own. Imani walked the halls of the estate, her father's letter still tucked in her desk. But now it no longer burned. It guided. She wasn't naive anymore. The wealth was messy, complicated, blood-stained in places. But it was hers to clean, hers to rebuild, hers to wield with purpose. And she wasn't alone. Julian Pierce had become more than her father's old confidant. He was her compass in meetings, her anchor in silence, the voice that steadied her when the weight pressed too hard. Sometimes, late at night, they'd sit in the study together, laughter slipping between the stacks of paperwork, hands brushing, eyes lingering. Nothing spoken yet, but everything understood. When the court documents landed on her desk, proof of Derrick's embezzlement, his betrayal spelled out in legal ink, Imani felt no triumph, only release. She sat across from him one final time in a cold conference room downtown. His once perfect suit sagged, his eyes wild. You think you won, Imani? He sneered, his voice cracking. You think anyone will respect you without me? She didn't flinch. She didn't rise. She simply met his gaze and said, I don't need respect from men who try to own me. The silence that followed was louder than his rage. He left the room in chains of his own making. Not literal, not yet, but chains all the same. That night, Imani stood in the estate's garden, the Atlanta skyline glittering in the distance. Julian joined her, his coat brushing hers as the wind stirred. You did it, he murmured. Her laugh was quiet, tired. No, I survived it. Doing it, that comes next. Their eyes met, and in that unspoken space, the promise of something more hung between them. But she didn't kiss him. He didn't reach for her. Not yet. The story wasn't finished. And maybe that's the part that should make you furious. After everything Derrick Vaughn did, after every betrayal, every chain he wrapped around Imani Graves, she still hasn't claimed the love waiting for her. Julian Pierce is right there. The man her father trusted. The man who's been steady through every storm. And what does she do? She holds back. She hesitates. She walks the line between freedom and fear, leaving us all hanging. Maybe you think she's wise. Maybe you think she's a fool. But that's the point, isn't it? Because the story isn't over. If you thought this was good, wait until you see what's on screen right now. The next story. Watch it. Because if you're angry that Imani didn't take Julian's hand tonight, you haven't seen anything yet.